Touching my hair, you guys, touching my hair yet again in such a way that drives a certain subset a little crazy. Okay, what are we doing today? Well, today I want to talk about a couple of different things. I don't have my ring light on today, and I am sweating my ass off. Sometimes I look at my clothes and I'm like, why haven't I worn that? This blouse is one that I've never worn on here, and I'm kind of like, why am I not wearing this lovely blouse? I love lavender. Well, I put it on 20 minutes ago, and I can tell you because I'm sweating my rear end off in the AC. So this is going on to the only where when you are in the United States and all that lovely air conditioning. Hey, Lisa, if you don't know me, I'm Suzanne Titkemeyer. I wrote for Pathos for almost 10 years, no longer quivering. I've written a lot about religion, but I'm not all just about religion. This morning, I got up to a question on my Twitter. Somebody had sent me a Twitter. It said, why are you not talking about the Gabby Petito case? And then I watched Dina talk about it, because Dina talked about why she doesn't do it, why she hasn't been doing it. And it's kind of problematic. Yes, the Gabby Petito case is very problematic. It's a heartbreaking tale. Every time I look at the pictures of Gabby, I flinch because she looks a lot like my youngest. My youngest baby just looks a lot like her. Good morning, everybody. Looks a lot like her. The blonde hair, the way her face is shaped, she just looks like her. So for me, I get a jolt every time. And also, I don't really cover true crime here, never have. Now, I've written about a couple of true crime cases when I was at No Longer Quivering, but that's really not my primary focus here. So I'm getting slightly triggered every time I see it, every time I see a picture of a smiling Gabby Petito. But when I see footage of her crying, like the police footage, it just tears my heart out. And I cannot keep up with all the little. So the most I'm doing is I'm occasionally looking at CNN's coverage. I gotta say, while I don't always like Don Lemon, I appreciated his coverage last night. He kept it factual. He did not appeal to emotions, and that was good. I think the Gabby Petito case is one of those cases that's going to have a whole lot of, how do I say this nicely, triggers for a lot of people for a lot of reasons. Like I said, for me, it was triggering because I can see what it is. Yeah, you have to. It's so sad. I think that the people that are covering it and the way they're covering it on YouTube are doing a vast disservice to the FBI and to law enforcement who are actually doing the investigation by pretending they are investigators. I think the worst and craziest I saw was somebody who was going over drone footage of Brian Laundrie's mother gardening. She was weeding a flower bed, and they made it out to be the worst kind of crazy that didn't even make any sense. There were so many things being said about this woman, and I cannot imagine having a missing child who was suspected of this. I cannot imagine that. I've said before, if it had been my son, I would have been bringing him down to the police station right away. Now I would have hired him a lawyer. I would have done the best I could for him. Because it's better to go ahead and face these things than it is to cover, because when you cover, you look guilty as hell. And here's the thing with that and looking guilty as hell with him. Maybe he didn't murder her. There may have been an accident. We just don't know. And so in order to people that keep injecting themselves into the investigation and doing this kind of stuff are doing a vast disservice to everybody, not just Gabby, but her whole family. Everybody is watching this. So there's that. And a lot of us are being triggered. Like I said, I've been triggered because the girl looks a lot like my daughter. And while I've never lost a child like others, I can only well imagine what that must be like. And my brain goes to those places, particularly since I almost lost her early on to a blood disorder. Okay, I've got to stop talking about this because I can feel my lungs starting and my airways are starting to do like this. And I know there is an emotional component when you've got asthma going on. So I've been putting off talking about yarn for a while because of a couple of things. So I've got to veer. I've got to veer towards crocheting again. Okay. Last time, not this time, but when I came back in late July, I brought yarn to extend my sweater. This lovely sweater. I made it from one of the UK crochet magazines just to have something light and airy to put on here in Costa Rica on those nights where it does get chilly, because we do get the occasional chilly night. The pattern was all wrong. It was all wrong, wrong, wrong. So I just decided to go ahead and redo the pattern. I redid it the way I wanted it without taking the sweater apart. I just added panels. So I've got big panels to wrap around myself or drape down like a scarf now. And I made it long enough to cover any amount of flab I got going on falling out. So it's colorful. It's cozy. It's just right for Costa Rica. It's not right for going back to the States, as I discovered on this last trip where I brought it and I was actually crocheting on it, trying to finish it up on the trip. Okay, and I finished finally the crocheted panels. I'll show you those for my kitchen windows. What I'm going to do now with these after I wash them and block them is I have to put a panel about this big with loops on it to be able to put it on my curtain rods. So I still have to do that, but I did finish up crocheting them finally. A very dull basic. And this reddish color here just happens to be the color of the walls right now. So I wanted to put something up that I liked all the colors. I could go with either paint, or if I decide to lose my mind and paint the room turquoise, which I really want to do. But I think I'm going to end up with a very basic beigey color because I got to think about the fact that at some point I'm going to want to sell this place. And the kitchen, really the living room that I have not remodeled. It's coming. Every time I talk about it, my poor husband starts shaking, going, "Oh my gosh, you're going to spend money." It's like, dude, yes, I need to spend money on that kitchen. The refrigerator has been clean. It's so old and been cleaned so many times, there's paint peeling off of it. The oven lost its handle and I can't put it back on. It's completely broken off in a crazy way. There are other things wrong with the stove. There are a number of things wrong with its handle back on. We might stick it out in the cabina because it'd be perfect if that'd be perfect for being used once in a great while to boil a cup of water, but nothing more than that. The same thing with the fridge. I may put it out there because right now I've got a little fridge, but chances are it'll go in the backyard and be a fridge to put drinks in. Okay. My other project I'm working on is some of the same type of yarn, but in a different color. I started it as a shawl. I don't know what it's going to end up as now. I may end up with it as a runner for somewhere. Now I got to show you guys my most shameful issues with getting appliances in the States for years. I know I'm going to have to go to Costco. Costco here is called Price Smart. It's identical to Costco in every way, right down to the products. And I know I'm going to have to go to Costco Price Smart to get my appliances, and it's going to be costly. Appliances cost a lot more here than they do there. Getting them can be a problem. I think the worst one for us was when I started looking for a washer and a dryer, and I started talking to everybody about what I could get repaired here. I had a very expensive lesson in the United States. I bought a very nice set of washer and dryer from Bosch. Now, I had a set in Germany and I loved them. Loved them. Front loader, hardly any water used, very little electricity. So I loved my set in Germany. So years later, I'm like, I can afford it. I'm going to buy a Bosch. I'm going to go ahead and buy what I want for my house because I can afford it now. So I bought a set and it turned into kind of a cluster. The Bosch, if you overloaded the dryer, it would trip this switch inside the dryer and you'd have to have the Bosch repairman come out. At about $150 a pop back then, I don't know, it was probably more now, and push the button. Finally, I had him show me where the button was. And when we went to rent our house, I actually made up a chart and said, you can't put more than this. If you do, this happens. And if you do, it's going to be $150. And I'm passing that on to you if you overload the dryer as part of your rent. Because I've already explained to you about the dryer, how much you can and cannot load. And it turned into a problem. It turned into a huge problem. So I've learned something. So this time I went with just a very basic Maytag set that I could get repaired here. And they're okay. They're not at all like a Bosch. They don't save water. And I have discovered in the last day or two that in the 3.5 years they've been in this house, I have rust on the dryer in such a place as it's broken off the handle. So I don't know how I'm going to get in and out once the handle is completely broken. When Bosches work, they're the best. When they don't, they're the worst. They're the hardest to get repaired in the States, unless you're living in a major city. Okay, so now you know about my washer dryer confloptions. I have to show you guys the biggest epic fail of all of my crocheting time, and it was recent. I bought this very lovely pattern at one of the crochet sites. I don't even remember which one. And it was really pretty. I mean, it was gorgeous. And I picked out some yarns that I'd like. I bought the recommended amount. I bought the recommended thickness, the whole 9 yards. I made sure I had the right size needle and I started crocheting. Let me show the center first. It was like, all kinds of lovely kind of cutout areas. There was raised areas. There's all things. Somehow, I found out that was the yarn written on the pattern was wrong, so I didn't have enough, so I started substituting, and I ended up with this wrinkly, ruffly mess, adding in colors I did not want. So I kept going, thinking that this would get better. This has got to get better. It's got to get better. Oh, heck no, this got no better. It just got crazier and crazier as I went along. So, this is one of those things that I'm going to have to spend the time to completely unpick it and use the yarn on another project. I have already even picked out what the other project will be. It'll be a Afghan for my bed in multicolors, but it'll be something a lot nicer than that and something simpler. Because the more I crocheted on this, the more I kept thinking, this is the busiest thing I've ever seen. I don't like busy. I only like busy just a little bit, like this comforter, but not everywhere. So that's going to get completely rebuilt. And everybody was asking me to show them the yarn I bought this time. And I've been avoiding it because the yarn I bought this time is the most epic bore on the planet. I bought more of this because I have a lot more pink and grays that I need to use up somehow. So I have a couple of skeins of this. I don't know what I'll use it for. I'll figure it out as I'm going along, which is how I do with a lot of my yarn. I'm starting an Afghan for the living room. And so when I was in the States, I picked up yarn for that. The living room is the same ugly orange that the kitchen is. So I have a cover that I made for our ancient sofas that came with our house. And it had some of the orange. It had the oranges just a little tiny bit, but it had burgundy and other pretty colors. And it's like an off-white and beige in places. I started looking at Breaking Bad with my husband, and I could not look away from an Afghan that Walt and his wife had on their sofa. It started with burgundy. It had little bits of like light green, and it had a whole lot of beige. So when I was in the States, I bought the yarns to make an Afghan, and I bought Red Heart, Coats and Clark Super Savers. I bought it, even though I know that I'm gonna have to wear gloves to crochet it. But you have to understand that this blanket for the back of the sofa is merely for looks. It's not one that anybody here will ever use. No one uses any blankets here except in the cabina where you put on the AC, and the next thing you know, you got icicles hanging off your toes. So this is going to be strictly for show. And just because I looked at Breaking Bad and fell in love with their just extremely simple Afghan. Now, one of the nice things about Tamarindo is we just got a yarn shop. Hallelujah. Thank you, Jesus. Whoever. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So we got this yarn shop, and I went in there the other day for the first time, and she has everything. So I was not able to get golds and the light orange that I need. So I'm going to pick that up there. I'm going to bring a couple of cuts of this awful red heart that I'm not crazy about in there with me and see if I can match a thickness. When I match a thickness, I'm going to get the golds, the gold, the yellow, and the oranges I need to add to this. Yeah, I'm so happy about that. Um, Thank you, Rose. I hope you successfully package up your chicken. So the yarn shop, I went in the other day, and they have all kinds of thicknesses, all kinds of grades. I don't know how great the yarn is. I had any luck with yarn here in Costa Rica. It's usually not very good grade. It's usually like Red Heart quality. So I don't know what her grade is going to be like. I had to buy a knife. I went all over for one for another project. X-Acto knife. I needed more glue sticks for my glue gun. And what was it? I also she had Gutermann thread. So I bought a huge pile of Gutermann thread because if you have a Bernina and you try to use anything but Gutermann, you're going to have a pile of problems. So I have barely used my Bernina since I got here because I can't get the right kind of thread. Well, she had it. And the other thing I got was a pile of embroidery floss. I'm thinking about doing an embroidered wall hanging of I want him to have on like a pimp hat with a big feather, and all 8 of his legs will be holding something crazy like a bottle of booze, a joint to smoke, dice. So I'm going to be giving him a lot of really funny things, all of the movie that the Wayans brothers did, Don't Forget to Drink Your Juice in South Central. I think that was the name of it, where the character, not Ashtray, but the other boy, each braid had something on it. One of them had like a pacifier, another one had little dice hanging, another one had a joint. He just had crazy stuff. So I'm going to do that to my octopus. I just think it'd be a funny thing. I saw somebody had done one that that I loved. That was a praying mantis pushing a Fisher Price corn popper. Question: I wish Contra here's a chance to pick a topic to speak on the platform. I'm willing to do that. In fact, I'm thinking about doing that because, like I said yesterday, I'm starting to transition to other things. One of the things I'm starting to transition to will be history, and some things like some weird things like UFOs and the paranormal. I've had a pile of paranormal experiences starting from when I was 3 years old. It's something I have an interest in. It's something I've hidden pretty successfully during my professional life. But now I'm a senior citizen. The wheels have come off the truck, and I'm just doing whatever strikes my fancy now. And the biggest part of striking my fancy is not mentioning a certain person. So that is it. And I'm not going to stick to her topics. I'm going off the deep end, doing the weird stuff, because the weird stuff is what has always floated my boat, whether it's crocheting. Sincere, you're right. It does. It gets very varied. Even when I become completely and totally outraged and I start talking about this stuff, it gets boring. It gets boring for me too. And after a while, you become kind of, I'm going to say, scandal fatigued. I had a picture on my personal blog where I had a guy sitting on a sofa that was on fire, and it said something like, "You've seen this S rodeo before," meaning that the couch is on fire, but this is not the first time you've experienced that. You're just completely fatigued by it. You're sitting back smiling because what else can you do? That's kind of where I am with content creators that talk crap about each other. Now I love Dina and her art stuff. And I'm not as out the box with her. I don't have as her. I don't have all the tattoos and I don't do art like she does. And that's cool. I love the fact that we all do different things. In fact, I like to say I didn't discover a new way to paint until I was in my 50s. I attended LSU and studied art. And at one point, my professors in painting, oil painting, were fussing about Bob Ross and putting down his techniques. And I just thought for the longest time Bob Ross was the devil. Okay. Well, when I started having bad asthma problems in my 40s, which I found out later are probably linked to the fact that I had a total and complete hysterectomy, and apparently going through menopause is sometimes a really bad trigger for asthma. So I had real bad asthma and I had to take weeks off of work. It would be so severe. And I started laying on the sofa and watching Bob Ross, and I started picking up some of his techniques, and it added a whole new dimension to what I was doing. And I'm like, why in the hell would all my professors lose their minds over Bob Ross? It's just a different way to get to the same place. Bob Ross is the sweetest. He is. His techniques are, Perry, his techniques are the best. You can get, yes, and go Tigers. You can get to the same place very quickly. I agree. All the media coverage affects secondary homicide victims. Everybody is covering that. Why not be unique in content? I totally agree about that. Especially when you're sharing stuff that you think that could harm the investigation. I was outraged when Robert Ferguson was murdered, and I still believe, not Robert, Todd Ferguson of the Reason Files 2 was murdered, because I knew Todd. I talked to him on the phone a few times. We exchanged correspondence a few times, and it looked like he'd been murdered. And the medical examiner ignored a lot of the physical data from the murder site. It took place in Columbus, which I've heard nothing but horror stories about the Columbus Police Department through the years. I was so outraged that someone I knew was murdered, and it was not, they pretended it was a natural death, that it was all I could do to keep my hat on. Gore does sell, but people also need and want other things. I absolutely agree. I wish content creators would speak on real life issues in the community where we can all truly make a change. Sincere, I've been thinking about that too. I'm thinking a lot about that. That's why occasionally you'll see me do some mental health thing where I'll say, this is how you deal with it, that it pays to have a panic attack plan, and why I had a panic attack plan when I would have terrible asthma. I'm no longer having those panic attacks because I can hold my asthma down at a lower level. It's a learned skill. I had to learn that. It had to happen. It wasn't natural. The natural was to run screaming to the ER when it got too bad and have a panic attack in the middle of that. Fortunately, I've learned others. So I think that I am going to be covering more of that. You know, the fundamentalists, a lot of them, the quiverful that I've covered, they like to also cover relationships and marriage advice. And it's almost always the exact opposite of what you should do. So many times at No Longer Quivering, I would criticize their advice and say, you know how you can stop this? Talk to your spouse. So I may go off into those things. And I think what I'm going to do is put together a survey and let you guys have a say, because I don't want to talk about I don't want to talk anymore about Katie Joy ever. You know, I've said so many times I'm not going to talk about it anymore and then going right back to it. I am just at the end now. I've been at the end for a while. Hers, I was stopping talking about her, and then her lawyer sent me that crazy email. And now she's threatening more stuff. Well, who cares? Who cares? We're not going to change her behavior. She's not going to change our behavior. So let's all just move the F along. It's a much nicer world when you don't have, oh, your deep freeze just got here. Panic attack plans. Oh, yeah, they do. They do. They do. I'm going to have to go over that. Sincere, thank you so much. I try to keep, I'm not a person that mopes much, okay? I like to laugh. I like to have a good time. And when I'm in that mopey phase, I tend not to do videos. And I get like that. I've been like that a little bit lately. I have to talk about a relationship thing before I go. Living in Costa Rica is weird for one reason and one reason alone. You don't make a lot of good friends here, and you don't stay in touch with very many of the friends you do make. It's a transient place. Most people go home between the 2 and 3 year mark because they can't handle not having fast food and Walmart next door. A lot of people flip out over those things. Those things don't bother me much. And I lived in Germany for some years. So I'm a big believer in adjusting to the culture, not demanding the culture changes for you. There are a lot of benefits for here. It's quiet, it's peaceful. Every time I come home from this, like, oh, thank God, I'm home. It's quiet. It's quiet. I can hear myself think. I'm not listening to the MARC train go by every 5 minutes. So peace. There's none of the stirring up of politics or the news like there is in the States. When you watch it, it's from a great remove. So those are the benefits. The benefits also are how beautiful it is here, the animals, the birds, then just the whole natural nature of how things are done here. For me, that just speaks to my soul, so I'm here as a result. So anyway, long story short, we have a friend, and I'm not going to say we have a friend that lives about half a mile from us, maybe, up the same road. Well, actually, we're right off the main road. She's on the main road. And we knew her and her husband since the beginning we got here. We didn't know them well until about the pandemic. When her husband, I'm going to call him Durwood because that's close to his name, but it's not his name. Durwood started showing up here every single day during the pandemic to hang out with my husband. And I thought, well, that's cool. I'd heard about Durwood. I'd heard that he was a chief, but I'm not going to stop my husband from being friends with anybody. If you know my husband, you know that he is a nice person. He's way nicer than I am. I try to be nice, but there are times when the brain mouth filter gets broken, particularly after the strokes that I've had, and it comes bubbling out. I wasn't a fan of Durwood's because Durwood would say these creepy sexual things to me. And there was an occasion where I got my car stuck in the mud, and Durwood came and helped pull me out. And then he rinsed me down because I had mud from the crown of my head to my feet. I broke my shoes even. And it was a little weird and creepy. I just got to say that. So he would say these weird and creepy things, and he would sometimes do weird and creepy things. So the most I would do is, hey, Durwood, and I would head in the back and do my own thing. I would go into my sewing room and sew or do whatever, and kept it at that level. Then one day, Durwood just disappeared. Durwood disappeared, and we didn't see him again. And my husband turned to me and said, it was you. You ran him off. Well, Durwood and I had a little bit of a scrap. Because he was a resident here, he could come and go where we couldn't. We were stuck here. If we left, we couldn't come back because the border was closed to tourists. So on one of his trips back, I asked him, I said, hey, Durwood, if I order a giant bottle of Benadryl, a much bigger bottle than this, and have it shipped to your daughter's house. Can you bring it to me? So he said, sure. So I ordered 2 of them. I take a lot of these because I have mast cell. I take much less than most mast people. But I got to tell you, this stuff is a lifesaver in so many ways. And I have an injectable too. So when he brought it back, he started asking me if I was getting high with it and said he'd read online it was good to get high with it and all this. So this just kept on for like a month. He kept pestering me about my Benadryl usage. And I kept saying, get out of my face. I have mast cell. I am not getting high with this. In fact, if anything, I wish it had no sleepy effect. But if you pop 4 of them because you're having a real bad allergic reaction or you inject yourself, you're going to get sleepy. That's just the way it is. So he disappeared. My husband said, well, you just gave him too much hassle for him trying to do a intervention because he didn't know. Well, about a month later, I saw his wife in the store, and I knew his wife. I was so semi-friendly with her. And what happened was I said, hey, sissy, how you doing? And she busted out into tears and told me that Durwood had left her for another woman. So it came out that they had marital problems for years, that he'd been leaving and coming back multiple times. And this was an ongoing thing that neither my husband or I knew anything about. And it's tragic because she really loves him. She wanted to keep her marriage together. She's a really strong evangelical Christian lady. And so Jim and I started helping her some. And what that spiraled to now is she's pretty much decided to make my husband her surrogate husband. And like recently, okay, I'm going to talk some crap about that poor lady. And I do think she's a poor lady. And I'm going to have to go talk to her probably today because I have some distinct things to say. And they're not going to be super nice, but I think she needs to hear them. Okay, she PMs us all the time for help. And that's, if we can do it and it's not too much out of our way, we'll do it. If it's not too much of an imposition. There's a whole lot of letting her daughter come here to do her schoolwork because we switched internets. We're no longer using eSay. She's still using eSay. eSay goes out all the time. That's okay. The other things she's asked us for that are okay. I drove her to the airport when she went back to the States and picked her up. Those things are all acceptable. The last 2.5 weeks have been crazy. And you know, I just got back from the States anyway. So we were getting PMs while we were in the States from her. What has happened is she has thrown out her back in some way, shape, or form. And I have sympathy for that because I do that too. But here's where that diverges. I throw in a few muscle relaxers and go on, and I avoid all the crap that hurts my back. I've been dealing with this for years. I've got thin discs. Yeah, her boundaries are not good right now, and I'm going to have to teach her what the boundaries are. That's a conversation we're going to have. So she started PMing my husband to take her to the ER in the middle of the night, and she wouldn't go to the CAHA, which is the local socialized medicine here. She's a resident, so she's on the CAHA system. She wanted my husband to take her to Punta Arenas, which is a 3.5-hour ride. And the day that I took her to the ER at CAHA in Santa Cruz was over an hour drive that day. And what has happened is the last 2 weeks, she's going from place to place to place, getting narcotics for her back, getting pain pills, saying her pain level's at a 9 or 10. So it's kind of ironic that her husband was going after me saying I was getting high on Benadryl, because now I'm starting to look at her and wonder if we're seeing some kind of drug-seeking problem that I didn't know existed. I know what it's like to have back pain. I know what it's like to have that kind of back pain. I don't know what it's like to have it not back off when you rest and you take the meds. Maybe she's got something more serious going on, but it's just gotten where she's wanting us to take her to the ER in the middle of the night when she could take a taxi for almost nothing. We're still under driving restrictions here because of COVID. You're not even supposed to leave your house at past 9 o'clock at night unless you're walking or you're taking a taxi. So there's all these issues and there's all these boundaries, and it has just gotten bad. And I don't mind doing some of it. She asked me to buy groceries for her. I went and got groceries because I knew her back was out. I don't mind that. I don't mind picking up medication. I don't mind helping her in that way, shape, or form. I do mind being asked to go hither and yon in the middle of the night. That's where I think the boundaries, and plus the fact that it's constant. Right now, I'm celebrating 24 hours without her requests. She stopped them last night, and I'm not really sure why. I'm going to hope that things are better for her, and we're going to have to. Yeah, I'm afraid she's going to OD too, Prairie. And I've had a lot of friends that I've lost to pill consumption, and she's, like I said, a pretty strong evangelical Christian, and she doesn't even like taking these things, she said. So if you don't take these things and you're not used to them, and you have no idea what you're doing, it'd be real easy to OD. Now, at the same time, I'm wondering if she has some type of addiction problem that I've just never noticed. So there's that. There's holy boundaries. Batman, I'm going to have the boundaries conversation with her. Like, call me to pick up groceries for you or to do this and that and the other thing. Don't call me to do all these other things for you because I literally cannot. Prairie, I'm thinking about calling the lady who owns the nearby private clinic because she went there the other day on a search for narcotics. And she'd had other people bring her narcotics from there. So I think I'm going to start with the doctor who runs the place, who I know pretty well. And I know she's a very kind and compassionate lady. And I think if I said, hey, now, you might talk to her about this, it would probably work. I know that she would do it in a heartbeat. She would talk to Sissy, and I probably got what was going on with Sissy and how best to handle it. Because that's the thing. I don't wish Sissy well. I want her to be happy and healthy. I want her to divorce Durwood. Wish Sissy well. I want her to be happy and healthy. I want her to divorce Durwood because he's a creep. He always was a creep. And I told my husband, I said, he's a creep. And recently, my husband and I had to have a conversation about creeps and creepiness and these creepy guys. And I told him, I said, I never want to ever hear you make an excuse for these creepy guys ever, ever, ever again in my life. Because it's just, we had a conversation with my daughters. My daughter and I were giving him the business about one of his creepy friends who'd been creepy with both of us. So there's that. And so we always have these ongoing conversations. I always laugh and say our marriage is a work in progress. It's not perfect, but we do the best we can. And there are times that we have to have those conversations. We're having the boundary conversation now. I'm trying to get Jim to say no. We stored a friend's car here for almost 2 years when the pandemic happened. And we gave it back to him. And it's just been a cluster of stupid too. And this has been going on at the same time. Now I realize we're putting money in his car. We told him that from the beginning. We put way more money into it to get it past the safety inspection, the Retive, and to get it past getting registered, which is the Marchamo. We did that for him, and that's it. Anything else is on him. So at first he was griping and moaning and wanted us to pay for an alternator and a battery for the car. And it's like, no, we're not paying for that. We didn't even know it was bad. The car was running fine for us. So my husband couldn't say no to any of this. And I was outraged when the guy said, oh, you're renting my car, so you can pay for those things. It was like, heck no, we let you leave your car on our property because we have a wall. We have a 12-foot concrete wall. We let you leave it here. We told you we'd start it once or twice a week and let it run for a while to save your money. So you didn't have to pay to store it. And somehow that went haywire. And my husband was going, yes, we'll pay half of it. I was like, no, I'm flying the birds and we're paying none of it. If it had been me, I would have pushed the car out the door and put the key in it and put a gratis sign on it for any Tico to walk away with. The car was over 30 years old. So you could imagine the kind of shape it was in. This guy's been kind of putting it together with baling wire and duct tape. There was a bumper that fell off because it was duct taped on with a single piece of duct tape. So it's just been a cluster ever since this thing arrived here. And this guy is still trying to work my husband for money. And I'm just like, nope. Jim said to me, or recent Sunday, he said, I am too nice of a guy. Maybe I need to start saying no. And I was like, yes. Oh my gosh, you need to say no. He had a situation come up where this older lady that we know needed a ride to church. A friend of his that doesn't have a vehicle needed a ride to church. And my friend Sissy I was talking about, all three of her cars were broken and she needed a ride to church. Here was the problem. Sissy had to go early since she leads worship. The other thing was the elderly lady, when Jim said, oh, we're going to go out of our way to pick up Dave, the elderly lady said, no, we're not. We are not. I'm not riding with anybody else. And it's carrying on like she's dictating everything. And Jim's like, okay. So he brought Sissy. He brought the elderly lady. Then he went back and got Dave. Here's the comedy. All of these people are within 5 minutes of each other. He could have picked up all three. If it had been me, I would have said, okay, picking you up, one trip. Because the church isn't even in Tamarindo area. It's a ways away. So we're talking like a 20-minute ride. So he spent that Sunday morning being a taxi for a bunch of ungrateful people that didn't even bother to give him a meal for gas, who could have paid $2 for a Parata taxi ride. So I'm kind of sitting back that day, just sitting back here with my computer, kind of almost laughing, because it was like, you're really letting a lot of people get over on you. And that's just his nature. I know that's how he is. He wants to be perceived as a nice guy. So he does that stuff. We're working on that. I'm trying to teach him right now about the power of saying no. I had to learn that after my experience with my first church, my first fundamentalist, evangelical, quiverful church, because I turned into a 5%er. And if you don't know what a 5%er is, it's one of the 5% of the people in the church that run everything. They do everything. And I made myself exhausted and crazy doing that. So never again. I've learned to say no. I'm not always the best at it. I'm not the best at boundaries, because spending all those years in Fundy Town has left me having to completely redraw where my boundaries are and doing a lot of hard thinking about it. So here's your boundary moment. Have boundaries, have good boundaries. You don't even have to be ugly about it. You say, I'm sorry, but no. And that's where we are now. We're talking about the power of no and the power of boundaries. And I am trying to work on what I'm going to say to Sissy, because I'm going to have to go to her and say, boundaries, please, because sometimes she contacts both of us. Most of the time, she just contacts my husband. And being a 5%er sucks a life from you. Hated it. Exactly, Lisa. It was terrible. You talk about something killing your faith, that would be it. I mean, a 5%er and having to deal with everybody else. Oh, my word, I have horror stories to tell from my first church. But I'm not that way anymore. I tend to go and sit back for a while and see, is there one or two things that I would like to participate in? Maybe I'll participate, maybe not. My church here that kicked me out because I would not back down on the whole issue of having a dog in church had co-opted me pretty hard for a couple of things, and I had to say no there too. And one of them was worship team, which I never know if I have a voice to sing with or not until I get up in that morning. And that alone was a pretty crazy thing I have to talk about sometime, because there was another lady on worship team that was she was just a horror show to work with. And I've been on worship teams for something like 30 years off and on. And it's kind of a dysfunctional family. You think the church is a dysfunctional family? Worship team is a whole lot different. And my friend Sissy runs the worship team where she is. So there's that. And I'm not joining their worship team, even if COVID rates drop enough to make me go back to church, what they have not. I was a deacon's wife, and hubby wanted to go to seminary. And I said, no, yes. My husband has talked to Lisa about going to seminary in his old age now and becoming a pastor a few times. And I said, please don't, please don't, please don't. Because I would make a terrible pastor's wife and be going, no, a whole lot more than a pastor's wife likely should. And I would be going, kapow, eventually, because I see the hell that the pastor's wives get put through, and it's way worse than the 5%ers. I would be like Melania Trump. You know how during her husband's administration, no matter how you feel about him, she was largely gone. Or if she did appear, it was just for a few mysterious minutes and a few mysterious things, and then she went back in the White House or in Trump Tower or wherever, still mysterious, saying no. She had boundaries. I got to give her that. She's got boundaries. Even though there are a lot of things there that are mysterious about her, it's not mysterious. She has good boundaries, very good ones. So that's something to aspire to have the kind of good boundaries where you really don't care what anybody else says. You're just know if it's something beyond what you know that you can actually physically, emotionally, spiritually, whatever, handle. And I'm going to leave you guys because I'm losing my voice. It's happening again. It's happening. My vocal cords are trying to shut on me. So you have a really good day. I'm going to put up a poll in a few minutes and say, what do you want to talk about? That's really what I'm going to do. And I'm going to veer. And there's, like I said, I haven't talked about her in a long time. I'm not going to keep talking about her. Dull. You guys have a wonderful day.